Welcome back to another episode of The Power of Your Story, a space for people to share their story, learn from their story, and ultimately empower others through their story. Today's guest that I wanted to have on the show, his name is Mark Guay, if I remember correctly from the time that he taught me the pronunciation of his last name to begin with. Him and I have been connected for quite some time now, probably over 2 years, and it's someone that I genuinely respect and admire in many of the aspects of life. And one of them is this new journey that he's been able to embark on, and that is the journey of being a parent, and in particular, the role of a father, which is something that him and I wanted to discuss during this particular episode. But for those that are tuning in right now, there are two things that I ask of you, and that is if you happen to like or can relate to any of the content or anything that we're about to put together, please share your comments in the comment section below through whatever platform that you choose to join in. And then outside of that, if you would please consider leaving us a review on Facebook or LinkedIn, that would help us tremendously. And with that said, let's get back to the show. There he is. Not bad, right? For a podcast production.
Oh, this is beautiful. I was just thinking, you just keep getting cooler every time that I get to hang out with you. You just keep getting cooler and cooler. So it's amazing. I love this. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. No, thank you for just being in my life. And as I mentioned earlier, you and I have been in each other's lives for over 2 years, I think. Maybe even longer than that.
Yeah, COVID has changed everything because COVID was one long day. So
yeah,
it's been, I think, actually about 4. Yeah.
4 years? Wow.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Because I remember the first time, I'll never forget me reaching out to you, coming across a poem that you wrote, and then reaching out to you and wondering if you wanted to share your adoption experience and everything that you've been through. And from there, like one thing led to another, and you were on the podcast. And in fact, the more that I even think about the picture that we used for this episode was probably the same picture that we used back then, like 3 or 4 years ago.
No, that's a different one. I did get.
Was it a different one?
Yeah, but I still should maybe get it updated.
But I'm glad that we're able to connect. I know that it's been a little bit of time between you and I.
Yeah.
Having connected, and there have been many things that have happened within my life. You know, as I shared with you, I recently hiked the Grand Canyon with some of my friends, and that was an experience, eye-opening experience that talk about helping me see something differently. I mean, for me, it was people helped me just reaffirm this whole concept of like, who are the really important people in my life, and me wanting to reach out to them and acknowledge the impact and the influence that they had. You've obviously had an addition to your life in your own family. And so I just really wanted to connect with you and learn more about that. What it has helped you see differently. What does being a father for you even mean? I know that a little bit. I don't know how much you want to go into your own experience and your own past when it comes to a relationship that you've had with your dad, but I bet it's been an interesting journey to be a father of your own.
Yeah, and Oleg, just to be clear, I'm happy to go wherever you wish. So I yet have reached depths that I wouldn't feel comfortable speaking about. So I'll let you know if that happens. But by all means, feel free to dig deeper. And my hope is, just like you're leading here with the power of your story, that in understanding and getting to feel into my story more, our audience here will be able to empower theirs as well.
Well, perhaps one way that I think we could start off this conversation is maybe even choosing to tackle the question at hand. And that is, what has being a father helped you see differently? How long have you been a father already?
Not that long, but yet it feels long. You know, time again is quite strange when you become a parent. My son is about to turn 4 months.
That is awesome. And what's his name?
His name is Rowan. He's named after the rowan tree, which is a very powerful hardwood, I believe. And it's the tree that when Thor was being swept away into the underworld, he reached his arm up high and he grabbed the branch of the rowan tree, and that pulled him to safety.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
Talk
also
about
known
a
as the tree
powerful
of life.
name.
Yeah. Well, most people know it as the tree of life. It's like that symbol where the branches go as high as the roots go deep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, if I remember correctly, last time I was visiting San Diego, I was able to stay at your place, and I know that you have quite a bit of woodwork, or you had quite a bit of woodwork within the apartment.
Yes.
Were any of those part of that tree?
No, great question though. I assume eventually we will certainly be using rowan wood in some sort of construction. But no, what you saw was actually from when I lived in New York. I used to take my paddleboard out on the river, Hudson River,
Mm-hmm.
and there was all this just beautiful driftwood. And I would bring some home because I just thought it was really neat looking. And my wife is extremely artistic, and she just creates art out of found objects. So she took the one you're thinking of is she made a macrame kind of plant holder based out of that driftwood. And it was something she just randomly did. But I think what we both learned through that experience was how important it is to make meaning out of objects, because now that means so much to us because we don't live in New York. So it's like a piece of our own story. Actually, it's kind of cool. It's like weaving together our whole story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think I do remember that when I was staying with you guys. I mean, two things that stand out just about who you are as an individual. Your hospitality. I mean, the way that you treat people and respect it. I remember at the time where I think you even took me rock climbing at the gym that you used to go to. So I think your openness and your ability to create that space for other people, that's something that I'll never forget. And I still remember it to this day.
You know what adoption, I think, teaches us, at least for me, and I don't know if this is the same for you as an adoptee, but family isn't blood. You know, family are the relationships in our lives that empower us. And so I've noticed in the way I interact with people is I treat people like family, and I mean it, you know? And so when you were here, that was just the way that I treat people that are in my home, you know, and you were a member of the family that day.
Mm-hmm. Now that sounds like more of a conscious choice though, because you've had a slightly different experience when it comes to the adoption, right? And the relationship
in terms of what?
And the relationship that you've had with your adopted parents.
Could you say more? What do you mean?
Well, I think like one of the things that really stood out to me, and I remember some of the conversations you and I had, was your relationship like with your dad and the different things that you were sharing with me, you know, as he was nearing kind of his days and his time. And I've wondered the same exact thing as far as what does family mean and how much of it is a choice that I make rather than the circumstances that I might be in.
Yeah.
And I realized that for me, much of that was a choice. So yes, I might not. I don't know what your experience has been like outside of your adoptive mom and dad, but for me, you know, I don't connect with every single person in my family, so to speak, because I think just we're not all in the same chapter or have the same interests. But I've realized, and something that I try to learn is that to every connection, it has its own layers. So like I feel more connected to you than I might feel connected to some of the people in my family, so to speak. But that's only because of the choices that I consciously made in wanting to create some of those experiences with people like you.
The way I look at it is there are technically members of my family, right? My adopted family, right? And even if I was blood related, I wouldn't consider them. I would still consider them family, but I wouldn't give them any more privileges than, you know, my really close friends, right? Or my chosen family. I would certainly open my ear to listen to what it is they have to say. But no, there's absolutely members of my father's side and my mother's side that I choose not to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And they're living their own lives, which is fine. But I think as we get older, it's really important for us to set up boundaries. And as you and I have talked about, who we keep around in our lives directly influences and shapes us and how we turn out. So
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to family, I assume it has to be really hard if you're not adopted to separate yourself from your family, from your kinship, because that in one aspect is a psycho-spiritual death,
Mm-hmm.
especially as an adolescent. One way to die is to be kicked out of your tribe. So to choose to leave your tribe it has to be, I imagine, quite difficult. But I think as an adoptee, maybe that's a privilege that we get. I know for me, it's been pretty easy for me to be able to choose my family and not have my family chosen for me. And I think that's really beautiful. Now,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, I'm a father now, bringing it back to our original subject. So this is all new for me. It's really beautiful, bringing my son into the world. And I'm happy to share the birth story and all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
already I am just in awe. In all honesty, I look at my son, and even since day one, it was very clear to me that he's not mine, in terms of like, he's not a small version of me. He's his own unique soul coming into this world. And I am just curious to learn who he is. And obviously I hope I'm going to do the best that I can to create a nurturing space for him as he grows into his adulthood. But already I look at him and I am just in awe at, okay, you're my blood. This is interesting. This is new,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not me. Who are you? I'm genuinely curious. And as he gets older and he starts, smiling more, and we're having these conversations with our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really amazing. And I'm very eager to see what age 3, 4, 5, all the way up to adulthood what that turns out to be. And I'm excited for the journey.
I'm curious to hear as far as what you would change or what you are going to change
Mm-hmm.
as a father compared to the journey that you had with your own father. What would you do differently now that you're a dad?
Yeah, great question. Well, the journey with my father, and when I say my father for our listeners here, I think Oleg and I share the same terminology. It would technically be my adopted father, but
Mm-hmm.
fathering and mothering is a verb. It's not a title. You have to earn the title. And so, my adopted mother and father earned the title of mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe my dad didn't earn it, but I called him it. We'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, the journey is pretty long with my father. When I was a kid, he wasn't really there. He was very absent. I don't have very many memories, and the memories that I do have are not very good ones. I have like little glimpses here and there of moments where he made me laugh and little vacations that we had. But the majority of the memories are not very good ones. And then there's just not many memories of it because he wasn't around. He was either working, or my mother, now I know as an adult, she made the conscious choice to bring me and my sister over to my Nana's, my grandma's house,
Mm-hmm.
when my father was on a bender for binge drinking. He was an alcoholic. So, let me just summarize the story, then I'll come back to the original question because I think it's important. So what I saw with my father was, he was basically an absentee dad, and around 5th grade or whatever, my mother divorced him because my sister and I convinced her to do so. And then he just pretty much went out of my life because he went into AA. He started living at his father's house, and I didn't really see him very much, up until around high school when he started to come back. And I just remember being reintroduced to him and all of that. And he had changed. And then it was around the end of high school and college that our relationship came back together, and I was able to see him anew. And it was actually my wife who really got me to look at my father differently, because at that stage, my dad was really just this goofy, bubbly kind of, guy who just wanted to make everyone laugh. He was actually a very jovial man. And he never touched the drink again, which is, to his strength. And I'm very grateful that by the time he passed away, which was just a little over 2 years ago, coincidentally, the same day that he had a stroke and died 3 days later is the same date that my son came into the world. So
Wow.
That's a powerful synchronicity right there. So yeah, when my father left, we had the most beautiful goodbye. I literally held his hand. My whole family was there, and we sang songs as he took his last breath. And it was by far the most powerful moment in my entire life, still to this day. And the birth, obviously, of my son was a powerful day too, but the death of my father was more energetically powerful in a profound, shifting way. So it was a very, very glorious goodbye, tear jerking and loving. And it was as good as I could have possibly asked.
Mm-hmm.
But even as a kid, I knew when I saw and I looked into my father's eyes, and when he was drunk and he just had black eyes, looked evil. And I remember looking into his eyes, and even then, I think I was maybe in fourth grade, maybe third grade, I felt bad for him.
Mm-hmm.
And even though, he ended up stopping drinking and ended up becoming a rather, jovial kind of laugh, like to make people laugh kind of guy, he was like this, oh, honk it dog, like this kind of like, oh, come here, and just like this cute old man when he died. He still very much was a little boy. And this goes back to the original question that you asked. When I look at my father and I think of him, I think of how he was really trapped. As a boy, he never was really shown love. His father was a horrible man. He didn't grow up in a family that was loving at all. It was a very traumatic childhood, and he never really found a way out. And so, even though he aged, I think like many people in this world, he never grew up, and he never really got to discover who he really is. Maybe on his last breath, he figured that out. But he was a man who was quite lost, quite sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt really bad for him as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to your original question, now me as a father, what I'm going to do differently is I think it's really important to model for our children what it means to know thyself and to actually offer your gifts to the world. I think personal development is so important, constantly showing and modeling what it means to question, who am I, what am I doing, why am I here, and approach life with just utter curiosity and yes, a growth mindset as well.
Mm-hmm.
So those are big terms to throw around, but that's, I think, the difference. And I think I think that's one aspect of good parenting that I wish to emulate, that I didn't have growing up as a model.
Mm-hmm. How well do you understand who you are today? That could be a loaded question.
How old do I feel? Is that what you're asking me?
How well do you feel like you understand who you are today?
More so than ever in my entire life.
Mm.
And it has to do with, actually, that's a gift to my father, because when he died, I went through grief for the first time. And grief, if you actually get the opportunity, I say opportunity here because it's a gift, but it's not definitely one that takes you under. It's a transformative experience. And so that experience opened me up to feeling emotions for the first time, probably since I was a kid, because I got so good at just stuffing them inside or away so I could be successful. But his death opened me back up. And I learned, that when most men in particular say, I can't cry or I don't get angry, what that really means is they're disconnected from their body. Mm-hmm. Because to have those emotions is the reality of being a human. Mm-hmm. So his death launched me into the greatest personal development I've ever had in my entire life, and it was the last 2 years, pretty much, of going back and doing a lot of different healings and understanding myself more than ever before. And it's interesting, Oleg, that you talk about going on the Grand Canyon on the hike at the beginning of this call, because I'm learning, or I have learned, that there was a split between ecology and psychology about, I think, 100 years ago. And I'm learning more and more that that split was unnecessary and it was wrong, because our psychology is actually webbed very much with nature, right? And if we allow ourselves to actually take our greatest questions and offer them to nature, what we find in return is often quite powerful. That's a longer conversation. I'm happy to go there. Bill Plotkin's work is the one who introduced me to it. I invite anyone who's listening to take a look at his work. It's absolutely monumental and just amazing. But what it does is
The Wild Mind, right? Isn't that one of his books?
That's one of his. Yeah, I have it right here. Actually, I was just
I read that one.
A men's group last night. His new one is The Journey of Soul Initiation. But there's a rooting that happens, and it deepens oneself, and it's deepened myself into who I really am in this world in a way that I never knew was possible.
You know, what you just shared in regard to your experience with your dad and what it helped you see differently. Right. I was sitting back here and thinking about my experience with my uncle. So when my uncle passed, this was last year, I believe it was either October or November, something along those lines. But biggest thing that I learned through his experience, and in particular his passing, was learning and understanding how to grieve through gratitude. And what I mean by that is, when he had physically passed, what I started to look was, what were the things that he taught me? What did he help me see differently? And I started to find these themes as far as questions that he was constantly asking himself, that in a way were just metaphors for life. And like, one of the greatest things for him was this question of what's next. So he had gone.
What's next after life? Is that what you mean?
What's next in the journey? What's next within the journey? He lived in Orlando.
In your human life, you mean?
Exactly, yeah. And he lived in Orlando for a good portion of his life, and then he was able to make the transition to Key West, and so he ended up living there for the remainder of his life. But even when he was living there, when him and I have these conversations, he would always bring up this question of, well, what's next? You know, where am I gonna go to next from Key West, and where can I travel? What can I experience? And I think it's such a powerful question, because it just allowed me to understand that there is power in being present and choosing to be somewhere for a little bit, or whatever that time frame looks like. But then there's also the power of understanding, well, you got here, you've experienced this, what's next? And I think within growth, what you just described, at least my experience has been, in developing this growth mindset, it's been with that question in mind. You know, like, I got to this point of forgiveness when it comes to like my birth mom. Well, what's next within that? And continuing to kind of like unpeel that layer and get to the layers beneath that. There is a danger of that approach as well. The danger I've experienced is constantly going after what's next. You know, it's a never ending question. So it's like, there's always going to be more to learn. And the danger within that I've experienced is, after constantly going after the what's next and finding that new thing, I actually didn't appreciate some of the things as much.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, so what you just shared, I thought that's such a powerful experience of what you went through and what it has taught you. And in knowing you, even the past, what you said, 2 years, but it's been longer than that you and I have known each other. I think when you started up on this journey, I was able to see and feel the transformation that you were going through.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So the person that's sitting right now, it's fascinating to see that. It's fascinating to see and And I don't want to diminish the journey by any means, because there's so many other steps that are a part of it. But to me, it's fascinating to see what a commitment to self can really do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. You know, I feel like for the first time, I feel like a true adult.
Mm-hmm.
I say that word because you've read Plotkin's work, you know how he defines that.
Mm-hmm.
And he argues, and I agree with him, that the majority of the world is full of adults that are teenagers in adults' bodies,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that the majority of that the world is lacking true eldership and true adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. I appreciate that very much. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say when you and I first met, I was really quite a struggling teenager.
Mm-hmm. Now, is your mom still alive? Your adopted mom?
She is. Yeah, she is. Yeah, she's, getting quite older. So it's, her health is not as good, but yeah, she's still alive and spunky as ever in her personality.
What was the birth of your child like for her?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, unfortunately, she hasn't been able to meet him yet,
Mm-hmm.
because of COVID, and it's tough for her to fly and to travel now. So we have to head out there eventually. In Buffalo, New York, is where she lives.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been great, FaceTiming with her and Rowan, and just seeing the way that the amount of love that she has. I mean, she's just an incredibly loving woman, and she loves kids. So she just gets so much joy out of being able to, share this love with Rowan.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about the experience of leading up to the birth of the child. I haven't experienced that yet myself. And just
are you asking me where children come from? Is that
no?
Well, let me tell you, you have two people.
No, but more so just leading up to the event. I mean, what were you going through as far as your thoughts?
Okay.
I don't know.
Here's what I'll say to that. Here's what I'll say to that. First of all, okay, everyone prepares you.
Yeah.
Up to the event. There's books upon books about what to do before. There's no one that prepares you for the first month. And all my parents that are listening out there know exactly what I'm talking about. Having a child is the greatest kick in the butt and heart grower at the same time. It's a true rite of initiation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think everyone has to have kids, but I certainly don't think you can understand the experience unless you go through it, because it is quite the initiatory experience. And I want to share this with you too, Oleg. My story with my birth mother, and she's an amazing woman now. And I'm sure she was back then, but she was a kid. She was 14 when she conceived me, 15 when she gave birth. Having a kid is really hard. And now I'm a, fully functioning, successful adult, right? I'm able to provide financially and emotionally for my family and be physically present. And I have an amazing wife who's able to do just the same. And we live in San Diego, which is incredible. And yet it's still hard for us. I can't even imagine what it would be like at, 15 years old. Now, obviously, I had former students when I was a teacher. I had former students who gave birth to kids, and they chose to rear them. Great, that's fine. What I'm saying though is, I always knew, even as a kid, that my birth mother, made the right choice, and I still to this day I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Because dear God, I can't even imagine what it would be like to try to raise a kid when you're 15. You're still basically, you just took off your diapers. So that's one stark reality that came into mind. Preparing for it, though, was I don't really have too much to share about that. It was reading as much as possible, doing what men mostly do, and reading as much as possible, preparing as much as possible, but yet nothing prepared me for the first month.
Was that an aspiration of yours to
have a kid?
That, but also change the circumstances that you were born into? So like when you have a kid, make sure that he doesn't experience same things that you did, or if he does, you're there to support in whatever way that you can.
I think you need to be careful there, because it can easily fall into like vicariously trying to live through your child.
Yeah.
and I certainly have to catch myself in that.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I wouldn't say. Let me make sure I understood your question. Actually, restate it just to make sure I understand it.
Let me go back in the
Yeah, that's
memory
what I
bank.
thought. Okay, so what I heard you talk about was something along the lines with raising my kid, and as it, like, did I want to have a child because there was an opportunity to basically redo my
Change your own.
life?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
No, not really. My dad's journey was his own journey. I don't think that's a good reason to go into parenting. Personally speaking, I mean, obviously I'm going to do that, but that was not the original thought. If anything, though, it definitely has fueled the flames of wanting to be a great dad, but already I've learned, I'm going to try to be amazing. I'm going to screw up though somewhere. I know I am. Because it's hard. It's just, it's a journey, an incredible journey, and I'm just going to do my best. But no, the reason, in all honesty, having a child, it whispered in my ear and my wife's ear, and it was just very clear. It was like, the way I look at it, this is my belief structure. So I understand yours might be different and your listeners might be different. But the way I look at it is that, we are born out of this world, right? And that a soul wants to come in to the physical presence. So we have spirit and we have physical presence, and there's a spiritual world and there's a physical world as well. And it was very clear. Someone was knocking on the door and saying like, "Hey, I'd like to come in. I'd like to come into physical form, please. That would be great. And I would like to come in with you and your wife, and Caitlin, you and your husband." And it was very clear. And did we feel ready? Not really. I mean, we tried as hard as we could, but I don't think you ever feel completely ready. But it was an absolutely clear, I'd like to come in. A child wanted to come in. And Caitlin and I looked at each other and we said, "Oh my God, to be able to bring a child into this relationship would be lovely." And I looked at my wife and I said, and I thought, to be able to have this woman mother my child, oh my God, how lucky am I? And I said, we have to do this, and we chose to try to create a child. And we found out we were having a baby 7 days before we went on lockdown. COVID wasn't even a thing. And then all of a sudden it was like, "You're pregnant. We can't tell anyone." And then all of a sudden COVID comes out, lockdown. I'm like, what the heck is going on in this world? I was just in San Francisco on a plane. Like, this is weird. This will last 2 weeks. And then now we're here a year later. And, I guess things are a little bit different, but not too much different.
So he was born during COVID?
He was, yeah. 11/11/2020.
Oh, 11/11/2020. Wow.
Right.
And what was that experience like? Because I know that, so my mom, she doesn't directly work in that space, but she's shared some stories with me, like some of the people that she works with, that there's only like one partner that can be in the room itself.
Oh, because of COVID.
Yeah, because of COVID restrictions, which I bet probably changes the experience slightly. When you have like, typically, I'm completely throwing assumptions out here, but during the birth of a child, at least what I've seen, is that it's a huge celebration, whole family, a bunch of people there, but then all of a sudden here you're restricted to like one person at a time type of thing.
So yeah, that's a great point. Here's what happened. My wife went into labor. I fell asleep. 20 minutes later, my wife goes into labor. It's like 10:30 at night or something like that. And I was like, okay, interesting. And we read all these stories, and I'm sure your listeners who have kids read the same ones. And sometimes the initial part of labor can last quite a while. You don't go into a birthing center or a hospital, or even go into actual real, preparing for labor. Some women even just bake cookies and literally just, clean the house, or do something, or go for a walk, just do something to keep their mind off of, the birthing process. But for my wife, it was like, nope, she's going, like, water broke, going into labor. Okay. Wow. All right. It was like, pretty powerful. So we eventually, went into the hospital in Encinitas, California. It's a fantastic birthing center. And I walk in, and they were so great, and everyone was so kind. But it was an empty hospital. It was, midnight, I think, by the time we got there. And I'm carrying my wife's water bottle, this Camelback water bottle, one of those unbreakable water bottles that she's had for, I think, at least 10 years, right? As long as our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And we walk in, and I turn, and somehow it slips out of my hand, and the Camelback shatters on the ground. This unbreakable bottle shatters, and water splays everywhere. And everyone looks at me, and I go, I'm pregnant, or I'm giving birth, or something. I said something, and everyone just started laughing. And so they cleaned up the water, and then my wife went into a room, and I was able to be there. Did have to wear a mask when others, when the staff was in the room. Thankfully, they were able to give her a COVID test, so it was like 20-minute results, so she didn't have to wear a mask, because I can't even imagine what that would be like to have to wear a mask during labor itself. And it was a really beautiful experience. I was able to, witness the whole thing, and I still can't tell you exactly how it happened. It doesn't really make complete sense to me, but all I know is, there's my wife, and then all of a sudden I'm holding the hands of my beautiful baby boy, and he just flew into the world, and just with so much energy, and stuck out his hands, and this reflex all little babies do, because they can't control their hands or their legs. And we have this natural reflex, like we know when you fall, you put your hands out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kids have that right away. So immediately, they catch the baby, the midwife, and then all of a sudden he just goes, I still remember that look, to this day. And I'm like, hello. And I'm, I haven't slept for a while, neither has my wife, but to see my wife go from, this, giving birth, which is a pretty powerful experience. I mean, it's a powerful initiatory rite of passage for women into adulthood in a way. And to see her then, take him and automatically just say, oh, it's okay, honey, it's okay, and just soothe him. It was just absolutely beautiful.
And how well do you sleep now?
Now I'm sleeping okay, but the first 3 months, let's not talk about that. Sleep doesn't exist. The first week, get out of it. Don't even no. Yeah, if I were to do anything different, I would say either hire someone to, like my friends in London, they have a night nanny that stays every night for the first week or two, or have your in-laws stay with you for the first 3 months. That makes it a lot easier. But yeah, it's a lot of work, and sleeping is really non-existent.
I could imagine. So, Mark, for the sake of time, for many of our listeners and ours as well, what are some of the ways that people can connect with you? Do you have anything that's coming up within your work? I'll show your website here at the bottom that people can go back to. And outside of that, tell me a little bit more about what's going on in your world. Yeah. As far as projects and things like that people can engage with.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, I love this ticker underneath. I want you to breaking news. You got to come up with something in the middle of a report. It's a boy or something to get your guests to laugh. So there's a couple things. One I want to call attention to for any of our men who are listening. I do run a monthly men's circle called Life Force. We just ran it last night. It's online. We've been doing it throughout all of COVID, and we have men who join throughout the entire world, and it's a powerful space to deepen into what it means to be a man and true embodiment of our masculine strength and emotional strength as well. So I want to invite any of the men who are listening to join that. Just send me a message. We just have a quick conversation and make sure it's a good fit for you. And then I'm currently working on a 3-day meditation journey to help people decrease screen time and focus their attention, because I've noticed just how incredibly powerful the screen and notifications are, and what they do to our brains and our energy and our inability to actually focus. And I'm noticing it with my son. So I wanted to take my meditation, my ability to create meditations, and create a 3-day journey to help people, take back control of their mind. So that will be launching hopefully this summer. I have the majority of it done. It's in beta testing, so I'm excited to launch that and hear from people around the world how it helps them.
Do you still do meditations on Insight Timer?
I do. Yeah. And I run live, talks, I guess. They're kind of like this, but except I'll have people who ask questions, and either I'll do live meditations or I'll talk about some concepts that I utilize in my coaching practice. And so people can access me there as well. But the website you just put underneath, feel free to send me a message. For anyone who's interested in coaching, I offer a free 20 to 30-minute call just to chat about what my practice is like and if it can serve you. So I invite everyone who's listening to reach out for that as well if they'd like.
You're awesome.
Thank
you for doing all the work and everything. Just I really, I look up to you in many of the areas, but I think commitment to self, commitment to growth, how you choose to look at consistency and just developing a rhythm.
We are what we repeatedly do. That's what Aristotle said. And I always think about that. But wait, I have a question before we sign off here. 0 through 10, 10 being I'm really effing ready, 0 not ready at all. Where are you with becoming a father?
Really good question.
That's right, baby.
It feels like a 7.
Oh, okay. I thought that. I sensed that from you.
It feels like a 7.
So, are you single right now?
I am.
Ladies? You, looking at you right there. Oleg will be traveling all around the world, so wherever you are, let him know. And maybe you guys can meet up for a coffee when he's in your country.
If this works, I have to give credit to you.
I've already introduced 2 people to their spouses, so I have an ability. So all I ask is that you name your firstborn after me. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, that's not that hard to ask. But now it feels more like a 7 because there are many reasons, but I think one of those that you mentioned throughout this conversation is that you're never truly ready. I think that's true for me. Life in general. I mean, anything that I've ever embarked on, I was never truly ready to do it. I just had to do it.
Yep.
And some things come into your life, so you don't even get the choice in doing it. It happens.
Right.
And I think the same thing when it comes to the child and being a parent. I'm choosing to actively have some of these conversations with people who are either in your position or who have been a parent for 5 or 10 or 20 years. But then also learning from my parents and my dad and asking him questions and looking at his actions. And
you had my understanding is you had a great father who's taught you a tremendous amount.
Yeah, he's been a big influence in my life. He's helped me understand just so many different things, but the way that he chose to look at the world and break it down and visualize the whole thing played a big impact. I'll also say that he's one of the people that helped me amplify, not necessarily teach, but amplify my work ethic.
Oh, yeah.
I think I've always been a hard worker, but just
I've seen your spreadsheet.
Having the ability to work with him, and it just gave me a whole other perspective. And it's a bonding activity for him and I. That's what we like to do. We like to engage in projects and spend time together. So it is my hope to pass on some of these things without necessarily being attached to, the kid has to be this way. He has to think that way. He has to do this. Because at the end of the day, as you mentioned, they're their own human.
It's pretty amazing, yeah.
And giving up that ownership is probably one of the key ingredients to a successful bond.
Well, I'm very excited for when we get to schedule a play date.
Let's do it. I appreciate you for being a part of this. And for anyone that's listening, please feel free to connect with Mark.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.